Thank you very much for coming. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. I know that it's difficult to kind of squeeze everything in with family and practices and all that's going on. So thank you very much for coming. So the plan for this evening is to talk about kind of the state of the schools and where our instructional strategy is. It's an opportunity to tell you kind of what some of our budget drivers are and what emerging needs are. And we're going to have some time for questions at the end. The presentation should probably take about 25 or 30 minutes. And then at the end, the plan is to kind of break out and move into the cafeteria and just give you an opportunity to talk to some of our school leaders that are here more up close and personal about things that might have resonated with you in regard to the presentation, things that might not have been included in the presentation that you feel is really important to talk about, as well as other priorities in the budget that you think you really need to get on the table. That's why they're here tonight, is to just kind of help us listen and hear from you, okay? I know WCAT is kind enough to be here this evening to video, and they're going to put this out, and we're also going to include a video. We've already sent a video out to parents, but the video link will also be included in this presentation as well to survey parents, just to get some feedback on what you feel priorities are. So this isn't a one and done. Our budget preparation in the season runs from November to May. And if anything comes up tonight, or if you think of anything when you leave, I would encourage you to please be in touch with me, be in touch with one of your children's administrators, principal of the building, or certainly you can give our Assistant Superintendent, Kara Morrow, a call as well. So again, thank you for being here. So we're going to just start off with about the objectives for the evening. So we're going to review the FY20 budget timeline. We're going to talk about kind of our instructional strategy, what are the parts of our instructional strategy, and kind of what some of our goals are there. And we're also going to discuss emerging needs, the information that we've collected so far in terms of our meeting with principals, assistant principals, and directors, but also meeting with teachers at every school. So the FY20 budget timeline, you can see it's kind of a budget season that runs from November to May. We start off in September and October compiling capital information about things that we feel that we need that are outside of our operating budget. They're capital requests. And we go through that with a fine-tooth comb, and we prioritize our capital asks. And we prioritize them into first-tier asks, second-tier asks, and third-tier asks. We know based on our experience that the town has about $5 or $6 or $7 million in capital requests with about a $2 million budget. So we work closely with them, and they've been particularly helpful in helping us prioritize and really try to figure out different ways to get parts of projects funded over time so that we can start to chip away and kind of make an impact and fix things. But things that are included in capital, when I talk about facilities, I'll talk a little bit more about this. But things that are included in capital are things like a sprinkler system for our Doyle preschool. Things that are included in capital are things like a new roof for the Greenwood Elementary School. Those are outside of our operating budget, okay, but they're things that we're seeking this year in capital. But I can talk more about that. But we get that information together. We get it to school committee. And this year, school committee approved it in November. We then submit it to the town. And then we kind of wait and kind of work through the process. So what we do is we get around. We've scheduled staff coffees at every school where myself and Kara will go and meet with staff. It's an open meeting time just to talk about what is happening in schools, what the teachers feel like the priorities are, and it's really an informal conversation and a great space for us to kind of really get some very personal information about what they're experiencing on a day-to-day. So that's an important piece for us. This year, on December 17th and 19th, the principals and directors presented their budgets and their priorities for their schools. And so this is kind of a check and balance for us to compare what teachers are saying are priorities and hearing from the administrators are what really are priorities in their building. But then we moved to staff forums, which we had yesterday. We met with teachers again in 5 through 12 and also pre-K through 4, as well as administrators, to give them a second opportunity to come in and talk about budget. We also issued a survey to them yesterday, and it's the same survey that we're using with parents to collect data around priorities. So, and as you can see, it runs to May. We'll present our budget to school committee in March, and then to FinCom and Town Council in April and May. Okay, so those are kind of the big important dates. Let's see here. I'm sorry. See if there we go. So kind of the FY20 budget, right? These are kind of guidelines for us. Will be driven by our instructional strategy. We feel strongly that there needs to be a kind of a theory of action for what we're doing and why we're asking for the resources that we're asking for. So that's really an important piece for us. It will include voices of staff, parents, and community, and it will reflect what we need, but it will also be realistic and be fiscally responsible, right? That's an important piece. You know, a breakthrough for us is we have, school committee has a finance and facilities subcommittee, but you know, a breakthrough for us is when FinCom members joined our finance and facilities subcommittee, and we were able to really work closely and have really hard conversations about why we need what we do and what the budget drivers are. And I feel like that relationship that we've forged in that space has really been instrumental in helping us understand both what the limitations on the town side are, but also it's been instructive for them to understand the complexity of how we construct a school budget. It's not the same as the municipality. Budgeting for schools is, parts of it are the same, but parts of it are different. What students need, and when we talk about student need and equity and what students need at particular levels, you know, they aren't things that you can always budget for in a linear fashion. And I'll talk more about that. So our instructional strategy this year and next, we're guided by our vision and our mission. Our vision is for the Wakefield Public Schools to graduate confident, lifelong learners who are respectful, caring members of our community. And I say our because it is our, right? You know, what kids do, what they say, how they act, they're a representation not only of you and your families, but also of us and our schools. And it means a lot to us. Our mission is to prepare students for college and career and community by providing, and this is an important piece, a rich and challenging curriculum, high quality instruction, and educational experiences, and the bottom is cut off, and I'm sorry for that, but it's educational experiences that meet student needs and their personal interests, right? So we know that to engage students, we need to touch on and intersect with what they're interested in personally. So our instructional strategy is broken down into 3 parts. One, it's investing in teachers. The first part is investing in teachers. And so we want to, and the 3 parts under this quality teaching part around investing in our teachers, the 3 parts is to foster continuous educator growth. We want to create the conditions and the culture where our teachers are also committed to their learning. The demands on teachers are changing so rapidly that you can't be effective in the role if you're not learning real time. Teachers are getting students in their classroom every year that challenge what they thought they knew about an age group or what they thought they knew about teaching a content area. It's just a reality. And so our teachers have been remarkably responsive in learning what they need to learn to connect with their kids, make relationships, be a resource not only for a child, but for their families as well. And so we want to continue to invest in this area, and we want to do it by providing continuous feedback, quality feedback in the supervision evaluation system. We want to encourage teachers to deprivatize their practice and work in professional learning communities. You know, professional development for our teachers has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. We have action research groups where teachers are making proposals to us and saying, this is what we want to learn about as a team because we think that this will make a difference for us and how we serve our kids. And they're studying and learning together. And then they're presenting material at the end in regard to what they've learned in regard to their research. That's a different way of doing professional development that we think has really paid a dividend. But we couldn't do that without the willingness of our teachers to be willing to kind of be a little innovative and to take a risk. And for that, I think we've benefited greatly, and our students have benefited greatly. We also want to build the capacity for high leverage instructional practices. There's so much education jargon and so many things being thrown at teachers. We want to give them permission and give administrators permission to make a choice about, okay, so what are the high leverage instructional practices for your school? So some principals have said, you know, our greatest lever is to really focus on student engagement, or our greatest lever is to really work on meeting the diverse needs of our students because that's changing so rapidly in our buildings. But that gives not only principals, but teachers permission to focus in one area within the supervision evaluation cycle in Standard 2, teaching all students. But what that allows them to do is to prioritize and kind of work in one area instead of 30 areas. So we feel like that has paid a dividend for us as well. But the first part of our instructional strategy is investing in our teachers. The next part of the 3 parts, the second part of our instructional strategy is to invest in curriculum and materials, to provide the teachers the best materials, the most current materials that are aligned to the most current standards, to give students their best opportunity to kind of learn what they need to learn to be competitive, right? And so we have a curriculum review cycle that we're particularly pleased and proud of. Every year we investigate kind of the current practices in a curricular area, and we make recommendations for what we're doing with those materials, what we're doing with assessments, and then we prioritize kind of what we can purchase to improve curricular areas at any given level. So the way the budget is constructed, we don't have enough money to do a complete build, K through 12, but we do have enough money to, you know, focus on certain areas within the curriculum by level. So for example, in years past, we've been able to prioritize math and purchase new math curriculum in middle and high school. Whereas, you know, elementary came before both of them. So we prioritize saying elementary comes first, middle and high comes second. And you can see that in the numbers on the vertical column here on the slide. So we are working at implementing assessments that are standards aligned in ELA, math, and science. We want to provide benchmark assessments for our students where we can track how they're progressing that aren't kind of too disruptive to the schedule, but that also can be used in a formative way that help teachers collect information about their students as well. So this year, in K through 4, we've implemented a new science curriculum. We've implemented a new world language curriculum at the middle and high school, as well as we've added curriculum materials in health and wellness excuse me, at the elementary and middle school. And so this year, within our review cycle, the focal area is social studies, which is perfect because there's been new curriculum frameworks that were just released. And so it aligns perfectly with that. And that also calls for a new civics class to be offered at the middle level, which we're excited about. We're also continuously working at looking at digital tools that can help instruction, right? And when I say help instruction, not be a distractor, but really help as a tool to kind of accelerate or personalize learning or support learning in a way that can really benefit students. So the third part of our instructional strategy is individualized student learning. And to be honest, I think that this is one of our greatest areas of growth. The needs of students are changing so dramatically that we need to learn and we need to invest both our time and our resources in providing the supports that students need to participate in their learning. The three parts to this is that we really want to focus on growth measures that value whole child development. You know, a game changer for us a few years ago is when we started to work with teachers to say, how are your students progressing? Not in terms of MCAS, but how are they progressing based on who they are and how they're developing? And teachers would say, you mean we can talk about qualitative measures in regard to how our students are developing? Yes, it's really important to us. And so, thank you, Mike. Thanks, brother. And so that was kind of a game changer for us, and allowing teachers to focus on qualitative measures and behaviors that we really want to promote and see. And it's different with different kids. You know, I've used the example before. If you go to our preschool, a few years ago, we had a student that wouldn't wear shoes. You know, and as a dad, I would go there and think, are his feet cold? Is he okay? What do we do? You know, and the teacher would say, don't worry, it's going to be okay. So for 3 months, no shoes in the classroom. You know, fall turned into winter, and I would go every time, and every time I would go, I would worry. Is he cold? No, still no shoes. And, you know, probably in January, early February, we went, little guy has shoes on. He's 4 years old, struggles with some sensory stuff. You know, that was a milestone in his development. That was one of many. And as that came, they started to come really quickly. But kids develop at different rates, and we really need to pay attention to that. And, you know, it gets more difficult. It's easy to do and see the developmental milestones when kids are 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's harder to see the developmental milestones when kids are 11, 12, 13, and 14. Because they can look like everyone else. You know, they can look like young adults. They can comport themselves in really remarkable ways. They can communicate well. They can be great with technology. But yet, you know, developmentally, there are still subjects and ways that we need to support them that are different and unique for those individual students. And we really need to pay attention to that. So when I say an area of growth for us, what I'm speaking to specifically is really number 2. We need to really develop inclusive practices using tiered strategies that can meet the academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs of kids, right? To not talk about these things specifically in this sequence is a misstep if we're not kind of talking about this in ways that we haven't in the past. You know, not long ago, students would arrive in school, and what teachers would do would work for about 99% of our kids. And now, kids are coming in with a range of needs, with a range of abilities. And so what we used to have as an instructional practice, it doesn't work for all kids anymore. So we really need to pay attention to what they need and also what they're coming in the door with. So we can talk more about that. Facilities update. And so facilities is a hot topic. And so I learned this straight away in my first couple weeks as superintendent. You know, the Walton, so this is one of the before pictures. And I know we have some PBC members here that recognize this picture. And so, you know, we would not have been able to kind of do what we did with Walton if we didn't have the overwhelming support of the community and the leadership, both on the town side, the school side, as well as the parents that have volunteered to be part of the PBC. And so, hopefully we'll click. So this is the facility after. So this is the Mary Walton. This is the new Walton entrance. If you haven't had the pleasure and you'd like to see it, if you let one of us know, we can kind of get over and take a look. It's really an amazing space. So on the right, that's not the high school gym. That is the Walton gym. It's the only gym like it in the district. It's air conditioned, which is pretty unique. It's the only one like it in the district. But it's a great space. It's really changed the school completely. It's changed the experience of the kids there. You know, when we opened the school and when we would go visit, we'd ask the kids, so what do you think? Kids would say, I love the bathrooms. Say, did you pick out the tile? Did not pick out the tile. But we love the water fountain. We love being able to move around and move about. So they didn't know what they didn't have, but now that they have this, there's no going back. It's a little like having our Galvin and moving kids to the high school. It's kind of a hard thing, right? So that's what's happening at Walton. The Doyle, our Doyle Early Learning Center, that's the old, if you build it, they'll come. We're kind of busting at the seams at Doyle, which is great, where it's kind of a place for us to work with families and students from a very young age, especially with cohorts of students that have special needs. It's really a great place for us to make relationships and to kind of build trust with parents and families so that they'll be willing to keep their students, their children in district and allow us to work with them. It's really a great place. So one of the capital requests here is a new sprinkler system for the school. It's the only building left in the district that's not sprinklered. And because it's a safety issue, we think that it might make the cut this year. We hope that it does. And we're pretty confident if it doesn't, we're sure that on the town side, they'll have a creative way or an innovative way that we can do this over a couple of years. So we also added a new playground, which is accessible for students with disabilities, which has been great for us. And so I know that I speak for Shannon Blacker when I say that it's greatly appreciated, the support that they've gotten at that school. Greenwood. Greenwood is really a remarkable building. I don't know that you could replicate that architecture or a building like that today. And so one of our big needs for Greenwood is a new roof. And so that's also on our capital list, and we're working with the town on that as well. But we're also going to make application to MSBA to see if they can support that. So the high school is kind of a hot button topic, right? When we made our way around the district, when kind of we switched positions, when our assistant superintendent came in, Karen Morrow, we went around and had coffees for parents. One of the first questions that elementary parents ask is, what's happening with the high school? What's the plan for the high school? And I'll be honest with you, we submitted an SOI this year to MSBA in the hope that they would support either a renovation or the building of a new school. And I was very optimistic. I thought there's no way that that we would kind of not be accepted into the grant process. But the competition is steep, and we were not accepted this year. And so, one of our, Chris Callanan pointed out, you need to be prepared for Plan B if you don't get in. And so we're prepared for Plan B. We're going to resubmit our SOI, and we're working with, again, on the town side to just think about, and we're really studying our pre-feasibility study that was done in 2016 to really think creatively and innovatively about options. So more to come on that. Another part of this conversation is our NEASC accreditation. So NEASC did a site visit. They're our accrediting body. And so, this is a pay for service. So we pay them to come out and kind of observe our buildings. And so their accreditation, we think, is important. We think it means a lot, but it's a relative thing, okay? So we're not losing our accreditation. I've been asked by some parents, will we lose our accreditation? And the answer is no. And so we've been cited, and our accreditation status is changing from warning to probation. And the reason it's changing is because of the physical plant, because of the state of the physical plant. It's one of the standards in the new 2020 NEASC standards, which really looks at community resources and the operation in physical plant and how that can impact teaching and learning. One of the comments of recognition that we got from our NEASC visiting team is that teachers are doing an amazing job. Could you imagine what they could do if they had a facility like Galvin? Let's just think about that for a minute, right? And so we have micro overcrowding, meaning the footprint of the school is 250,000 square feet. the footprint of the school makes you think that we have enough square footage, but in certain curricular areas, they're overcrowded. As the maths core has changed, and as people are taking more art, and people are participating in higher levels at fine and performing arts, we have students that are, taking instrumental lessons in what used to be custodial closets. Not okay. We have questions about ADA accessibility that we need to remedy. We have questions about, why, our kind of dark room, our photo lab is in an old men's bathroom. It's a little rough, but kids kind of rock through it, and the teachers do it as well, and they're kind of they're doing a good job. But the facility is getting to a limit where we really need to kind of think creatively about what our options are. So that's kind of an update on the high school. And that's it for facilities. I'll take questions at the end. One of our budget drivers, and when we get together with Finance and Facilities Subcommittee and FinCom members, we always get questions about special ed. The cost of special ed can be exorbitant, can really feel like, we often get questions like, how do you manage? And last year we had a budget shortfall, and we could not have gotten through that without the leadership of both our school committee and the support of town council and FinCom. So we froze the budget last year in October because we knew that we were going to have a problem. And we worked all year long to save money, but also we kind of worked creatively to think about what we need to kind of make that right. And so we worked through that. And one of the biggest questions we get is related to the second bullet here, which is how are you managing out-of-district placements, and what do they look like in the coming year? So the good news is that we're managing our budget well this year, and we look to be operating within our budget, which is terrific. And so, but a challenge for us, and something that's critically important for us to do, is to develop and support learners and to expand programming so kids can stay in district. That comes at a cost. When we need to hire a teacher, when we need to hire personnel, when we need to open a classroom that we didn't have, that comes at a cost. It's not part of our normal operating budget. And so, but when we make that investment, when we expend that money, and in the long run, when we're able to support students and keep them in district, it's really a windfall, but it comes at an initial outlay of money or an investment. And so the second bullet, based on the completion of programming of students returning to district, we're anticipating a reduction in our FY20 out-of-district placements. That's currently, right? And that can change at a moment's notice, right? That can change at a moment's notice, as student needs can change at a moment's notice. So that's an important piece to kind of add here. So the district is also, we are proposing the expansion of language-based programs at the middle school, and also opportunities to support social communication at the middle school. That is an expansion of services beyond what we currently have. And we hope that we can do that in this budget. The district also continues to support the expansion of counseling service to support social emotional health and learning, as well as academics and behavior. So those are the important pieces. I think I've highlighted the important parts of special education there. So the emerging needs, based on conversations with our administrators and our teachers, this is broken down as our instructional strategies in 3 parts. This is also divided into 3 parts. Our emerging needs are to have STEM support at the elementary level. With a new science curriculum in elementary, K through 4, teachers need support in professional development and using those curriculum materials and help in engaging students in science, technology, engineering projects that we didn't have in place a year ago. We need counseling staff. So an ask across the district at all levels was we need help with counseling staff. So at pre-K, K4, middle, and high school, the asks were that was one of the very top asks across the district. So other areas that we're seeing some need are art support, music support, both at the middle and high school. And one of the big pieces here, I know it's at the bottom of the first column, is increased student contact time. So in our last round of negotiations, teachers said to us, when we made our way around and met with teachers and had coffee and we talked with them, they would say, we just need more time with our kids. We need more time. We need more time to give them what we need, and we need more time to complete the work and things that we're working on in our school. But it might not be academic time. When I stepped into this conversation, I was the assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum and instruction, and I thought, we need 15 minutes of increased academic time. Based on my conversations with teacher leaders like Chris Gorski and Rick Manzi, I was quickly persuaded that it doesn't necessarily have to be academic time. They gave me an example where they said, Doug, 5 minutes added to our 22-minute lunch, 5 minutes added to our 22-minute lunch at the middle school could revolutionize our whole school. Kids could go out to recess. We could clean the cafeteria in between kids coming and going, in between classes. That could be great. 5 minutes. And so I thought, okay, what would you do if you had more time? We would love to have 5 minutes in the morning with our kids. So these are just examples at the middle level. Elementary teachers have said, it's really important for us to have kind of a way to start the day where we feel like we're not stealing instructional minutes from curriculum that's really important to get to. But if we're going to focus on social emotional learning, we need the time. There's also times within our schedule where we need to take kids out for recess. And that needs to be okay. We need to be able to make that decision. So based on our last round of negotiations, we were not able, because it just kind of came too fast in the conversation, it was decided collaboratively by both sides that we would take this 3 years in between our last contract and this contract, and we would put together a focus group on student contact time and make a proposal. And we've made a proposal. And the proposal is to add up to 10 minutes, or between 0 and 10 minutes, at the elementary and middle school level. At the high school level, it's a little bit more complex. We really need to look at, how we're using the instructional minutes that we have. We need to look at, our release times. We need to look at, when seniors get out. We need to look at how professional development is working for staff there. We need to look at our exam schedules there. One of the things that has resurfaced is late start time for high schoolers. I received email this week with a question. One of the parents is here, sent me a note. And so, but the question is, where do we stand with late start time? I thought that this was an important thing. And it is an important thing, but I will tell you that, some great ideas never make it to kind of the operation of schools because there's too many kind of conflicting agenda, or there's too many conflicting things that get in the way. And so late start's a great idea, but if it presents difficulties for your community, it just doesn't work. I don't know if anyone might remember in Boston, one of the last things that the superintendent did before he departed was he pitched this idea that we're going to have late start time, you're going to love it, it's going to be great, let's go. They just published their late start times without doing work with the community. Parents said, well, wait a minute. That means that my elementary school child, you've just switched times so that my high schooler is going to school at 8:30 in the morning and getting out at 3, and my elementary child's getting out at 2, and they're going to be home in the house with no one there. How does that work for us? And how does it help us as families to get our elementary students up and out an hour and a half earlier? Right? That creates a whole other level of hardship. And so these are things that we're just looking at. But in regard to student contact time, these are things that you'll hear more about. But I think that they're really important. I think in regard to the high school, we do need to look at the schedule. And I know that we're going to have to collaborate with the WA leadership in thinking about what not what can't be done, but what could be done, right? And so in regard to rigorous curriculum, we still have a need for level text in classrooms. Social studies curriculum materials and civics is a curriculum need that this year it's going to affect the budget. So our social emotional health and learning curriculum and materials, that's SEL curriculum. Excuse me. And so I mentioned health and wellness. Technology and engineering curriculum is also really a tremendous need for us. You know, what we could be doing both at the middle and high school, what we're doing currently has expanded probably 3, 4, or 5-fold compared to what we were doing 3 years ago. But what we could be doing in regard to coding at younger grades, in regard to more formal coding courses at the high school, there's really just a lot of potential there. And in terms of individualized student learning, there's a need for more special education teachers, as I mentioned, the areas where we're going to expand, or we hope to expand. Teachers have asked for help with reading support for students. That's an area that we really need to look at. District intervention services. What happens when students need help or support and they're not learning? How do we provide intervention is a question that we need to examine. And services and resources that we have to do that is a question for us. One of the things that has come up is a service coordinator, right? To have someone that can work with maybe middle and high school students on service projects, maybe community service projects, maybe innovative intern or extern projects where kids can go out and learn in a business. And maybe some of our teachers who are interested in how, you know, what it looks like out there, what they're preparing kids for, could also get out on intern and externships. That's a longer conversation. So one of the things that we're doing is we're refining our data teams. So we have data teams at some schools, but not others. Some schools are getting a slower start. So we're really trying to look at kind of improving those across the district. And we're really trying to update our assessments and data tools to really monitor progress. And I think, you know, with the addition of Matt Carter this year focusing on data and working with principals, that's been a windfall for us this year. So, and for district personnel, we desperately need IT support, I can tell you that. So in about 5 years, we've added about 3,500 machines to the district. And, you know, if you think about the businesses where you work, you know, I don't know the size of the businesses where some of you work, but I was an engineer in my prior life. And, you know, I worked at a semiconductor industry or a semiconductor company. And there were about 1,000 employees. Our IT department had about 50 employees for that 1,000, right? We have, you know, interestingly, we're about the same size and we have 2 people. You know, it's just not cutting it anymore. So we need to get some help in that area to implement our technology plan over time. So one of the things that has emerged is the need for increased behavior coaching. We have a 0.5 behavior coach, and she's doing such a great job for us. You know, the question has really been posed, could you imagine what we could do and how that person could help other adults, help students, and help families if they were a full 1.0? So we hope to add there. One of the asks was to add a traffic supervisor, and the other is to add a custodial staff member. And so these are emerging needs and asks. Do I think that we will get all of them? I don't. We do need to prioritize. You know, we do need to be innovative. We do need to think creatively. And we do need to act responsibly with the resources that we are going to have. So, I don't know if people have questions. I'll be happy to take questions. And then the plan is to kind of turn some time over for you to talk with our building and district administrators to kind of talk with them out in the cafeteria. Questions? Yes. So, I feel like I got it. Yeah. No, it's so if you missed the question, let me try to repeat it and tell me if I missed anything. So the question was the need for someone to really help out with the intersection at Nahanton Farm. Is that right? And so, that is a treacherous intersection in the morning. I drive that way every morning, and some days I try to get here early, but some days when I'm stuck in a queue and, in the fall, I'll see a student skateboarding down the hill with a coffee with earbuds in, and I marvel at the skill, but I'm always terrified at the intersection that he's going into, right? And so I don't know, it would be district-wide is what that would be. But if you feel like that's a particular area that you would like to prioritize, at the bottom here is a survey that you can provide that information. And if there's not a space where you can kind of get what you need, right, or to get that information, you can send me an email directly, and my email address is on the next slide. Okay? Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah. Andy? Did you know that it was part of the plan? Yeah. So as part of the new high school in the pre-feasibility study, the proposal for a new building was to realign those streets and to actually move that street over for what is currently the parking lot, and the kind of the property that would be lost would be gained on the other side, but it would align that street. And that's doing a new high school or kind of doing a renovated high school. It would be crazy, in my opinion, if we didn't do something like that. The other part of this is that the Voc is also doing new construction, and it just falls right in line. It seems to make sense. Sure. Michael Pifferling could help us with that. So the question is, what exactly does the traffic supervisor do? Would they be doing kind of engineering and design and analysis of traffic patterns? Sir, Philip. Yep. 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 It's true. Yep. 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 Right. Right.
And that's my comment. And I want to thank you for all your work and everyone. This is not meant as criticisms, but it's just worries and concerns that I have as a taxpayer and a parent.
Yep. So we're reapplying to MSBA. So we're resubmitting an SOI to MSBA. But before we do that, what we're going to do is we're kind of working with, Stoneham was just accepted in this year's grant round, and it took them 5 times of applying and also to be in the same NEASC accreditation kind of level that we are now. So I hope to not to have it take 5 times. Really the goal would be to have the next year that we're submitted. But what we're doing, Mr. Renzi, is we are kind of going back through the SOI, really going line by line and looking at not just, so there's a way to just literally resubmit what has been submitted, okay? It just repopulates a form and you can reapply. And we're not doing that. We're pulling it down and we're going line by line and we're going to look at kind of the state of the state and where we are. We're going to talk about safety issues. We're going to talk about ADA accessibility. We're going to talk about micro overcrowding with a little bit more language, with more examples that we think can make a more compelling case, hopefully to make Wakefield a top candidate in the next round, which would be 2020, right? And so the deadline to submit is April 12th. I think it's Friday, April 12th for a core project. So, but we would find out next December whether we were accepted or not. I agree with you. It's not a quick fix because once we're accepted, then it's going to take how long? I mean, you were involved in the construction here, correct? You were not. Okay. Chris, how long did it take the Galvin to be built once we were accepted into the grant? So Chris just said it took 3 years for the Galvin to be built after they were accepted into the grant, which I think is pretty quick. That's kind of on the quick side. I think it might take more like 5 years. So I think you're right. I do think there needs to be more more planning about this. But on the school committee side and finance facilities planning, our plan is to literally go back through the SOI, to improve it, and to resubmit it. That's kind of that's the part of the plan. But the other plan is to really go back through the feasibility study. And a question that we're kind of wrestling with is, are the numbers and are the options within the feasibility study that was done in 2016, is that kind of, should we think about how to update that plan, right? Is kind of the budgeting and the numbers that were used to create options. That was done in 16. Based on the feedback that we got from MSBA, that's anywhere from between 20 and 40% beneath the actual costs, right? And so, I mean, there are things that we need to do, but I think first is to kind of work on the SOI. The next is to really look at the feasibility study, to look at options and look at those numbers. I don't know if that answers your question, but. Yep. Right.
Talking 5 years, you know, I have peers in this community that are sending their kids outside of not sending them to the high school because they can't get a good science, you know, they want to be a doctor, they want to vet, they want to get a nurse. They can't get that education with the labs that we have and the science. It's a shame. And I don't want to do that. And I think if we can,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the idea of forming a group to really look at what options are could be a great next step. And maybe we could talk at the break. Yes. Yes. So we're not going to lose our accreditation. So I don't know if you missed this earlier when I was talking about NEASC. So NEASC is their annual meeting, or in their January meeting, they're going to make a determination on the status of our accreditation or the level of our accreditation. So we've been on warning for 7 or 8 years. It's fondly referred to by the PBC as double secret probation, because during that time, you know, there's been a lot of areas of improvement at the high school since 2011 when we were placed on warning. Areas, you know, in regard to curriculum have improved, in regard to technology has improved, in regard to professional development. Those are now areas of recognition. However, the physical plant still lags behind. But to answer your question, our accreditation status is changing, but we are not losing accreditation. So the next round of accreditation is in 2022, and so I'm told by NEASC that our accreditation, if we continue to work with them and continue to work on a plan to improve the physical plant, that we will not lose accreditation. I'm also told that in the history of the NEASC organization, I think only one school has lost accreditation, and that's kind of a longer, more complex conversation. But we're not going to, nor are we in danger of losing accreditation. So it's warning, probation, and then unaccredited. But again, you know, we are not losing accreditation. Yes. Yes, and so in 2015-16, the pre-feasibility study that was done to create options was done by Doyle and Whittier. So money was allocated by the town to pay them to study all options, and for architects to come in and work with a group and to really talk about options. And so that study that we have, that Mr. Renzi was referring to, it did exactly that. So, you know, I think, I'm not sure about process, and Chris might be able to help us with this, but I think if the town commits resources and they get into a construction project, I don't know that you can then apply after the fact, because you have committed to a plan that wasn't done collaboratively with them. I think that that's my understanding. So, yes, Susie? So I don't. So let me repeat your question so that people can hear it. So Susie's question is, have we worked with the town council or the town leadership and actually run the numbers to think about what it would cost for us to just do it independent of MSBA? Is that correct? And so I haven't been part of one of those conversations. I do know that in just hearing from the executive director of MSBA and the cost of a high school, being $100 to $140 million, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think that would be feasible. But if people are open to having that conversation, I think, great, I'm in. But I know, but let me share. I think that there's been other conversations about, if initially what was cited and kind of through NEASC and through MSBA is that our science kind of rooms were really lacking. So one of the conversations was to build a science building. But, again, that's really not, it's kind of like building a garage before you build your house, right? And hoping that it matches, right? And so I think that that's just really dicey from my perspective. Andy? Yeah. Sure.
On the flip side, if you kind of explain the distinction between the accreditation degree here and getting in trouble with DESC and receivership and what happened with school in Holyoke, that we're not facing anything along those
Yeah.
lines, that the schools
Yeah.
pick their children in college, they would love to have your children in college,
Yeah. Yeah.
that it's really just more, I hate to say paperwork, but it really is not the same thing as getting someone from the US.
So I'm glad this is I think a really nice question, because it can help us maybe communicate kind of some of the layers and the complexity of this. So in the last decade, and actually last 2 decades, the state has put requirements on school districts and schools to maintain a certain standard with curriculum, maintain certain standards with how they're accommodating students with special needs, maintain certain standards with how you're accommodating ESL students. And so the oversight that we now get from the state is considerably more rigorous in the last 2 decades than it was for the prior 80 years. So, and really what that did is that kind of challenged NEASC's value, because NEASC is an independent player, right? They're not a state entity, okay? And so when districts are taken in receivership, okay, that's the state saying the requirements that we're asking you to operate at kind of minimum levels, you are not meeting those expectations. So we are going to take over the leadership of the district, okay? And use Holyoke as an example. And my friend Steve Zreich is there now, right? And I think he wishes he was back here, to be completely honest. However, so that is completely different than NEASC, okay? NEASC is a private business, okay? And so the standards and the work that they do are kind of, it's honorable. It's to help schools kind of maintain levels that they need to maintain. But I think the state expectations are more rigorous, to be honest. And they're two separate worlds. So no college, no college, none, will have any problem cashing your check if you in regard to NEASC accreditation. None. So I'm being a little facetious, and I probably shouldn't. So let me answer your question more directly. So NEASC will not affect any kind of students. They're applying to college, they're being accepted to college, and they're attending college. At DESE, we had a coordinated program review a year ago. We had a targeted program review and a coordinated program review, as well as a grant program review. And so we had essentially 3 program reviews in a 1 year, 1 calendar year, and we've kind of gone through all of those reviews and have done really well. So, which we're pleased about. Yeah. But thank you for asking the question. Mr. Markham, Tom?
Hi, Doug. Thanks. I'm Tom Markham, chair of the school committee this year, and I guess first I'd like to thank Doug for a great presentation, and lots of thought and energy have gone into this, and this is really a wonderful way sort of to kickstart exactly this type of conversation across town and in the coming months. To Phil and even Susie's point, and really something that probably everyone has on mind with regard to the high school, I think I can very comfortable in speaking for the school committee to one of Phil's questions was, that our commitment is incredibly strong and incredibly high. We must we must make put some concerted energies into which is exactly some of the things that Doug referred to about the complete a rewrite, if you will, or a re-examination of the present SOI documents, and to make the case as strong as possible. We are bringing in some folks who have some real outside experience and some re-examination of things that we already know. Some of it will be tweaking, and some of it will be sort of a reassessing and putting a different spin on things that we already appreciate. I think some of the points that need to be in the backdrop, if I may, are that the 3 times that we have submitted SOIs, regardless of some of the concerns about incompleteness or that, the state has been quite responsive and quite impressed, frankly, with the SOIs that we've turned in. They've been equally impressed in the site visits, and we've actually got some fairly good feedback. I think objectively also we need to think, at least also in the back of our minds, when we form together as groups, which we want to be able to do, but I think we also need to be thinking that part of the state, from the MSBA's perspective, is there are limited resources, just as there are in our town. Phil, your opening comments were that you were on the capital planning committee. When you firsthand know exactly the type of needs across the town, and never mind just across the school district, but across the town, and the type of things that need to be advocated for and paid for, and with limited resources within our town. So the state and the MSBA is really no different, their position 3 times now has been, for good or bad, at least in our parochial interest, it's bad, that there are other communities that are far worse off than Wakefield is. And I suppose as a member, a citizen of the Commonwealth, we can probably objectively appreciate that. Now, that doesn't help us get us where we want to go, but it at least takes some feedback from the MSBA that says that we haven't put a dog before them. We haven't, wasted their time. We have made it through a couple rounds, just not into the finals. So I think the type of things that, hopefully the type of things that we're going to be doing to reassess the SOI in its present place may put exactly the type of needs on it for next year. That being said, the school committee has been and will continue to discuss, in fact, it's on our agenda for next Tuesday night, to discuss exactly what type of citizen activism we may want to inspire to exactly have these type of conversations. To Susie's question earlier, I mean, we do know from the feasibility that was done a couple of years ago now in preparing for the SOI, we do know what some of the costs were, at least, depending on which of the scenarios we went with. We had some ranges, and those ranges probably, even though they're now 4 years old, they're probably still clean enough to be able to put some math against without actually coming back to town meeting and asking for more resources. Now, that may be something in the end of the day that we want to do, or if we pull together a citizen task force and the citizen task force decides that we do want to go before town meeting, then we certainly have that option. But one of the things that I think would be very difficult to sell, frankly, to the town is that, I think anyways, that if we move forward with projects and sort of piecemeal anything on that campus, our ask of the MSBA, it gets minimalized. Whereas if we start to do science wings, or we start to put on new roofs and new maintenance mechanical systems, then the state's going to look at that and say that's we're not going to participate in pouring good money after bad. So there's a lot to be considered, but certainly, I know I can speak for my colleagues. There are 6 of us here tonight. That our commitment is incredibly strong to move forward on making the high school the priority that it needs to be. Again, we all have limited resources, and those are the type of things that we as town meeting come together twice a year and exactly discuss. So I'm sure in that context, we'll have a healthy debate this coming spring. Look forward to that.
Yeah.
Understanding of a snapshot of where Wakefield sits in line of severity, assuming like each year schools that were in dire straits have now been taken care of and higher up the chain.
So it's not a static list. So it's not like you're in the queue. If you were 12th last year, you'll be 11th or 10th, and so, if we take off the top 5, then the next group moves up. It's really about the cohort of schools that apply in a given year, right? I don't know if that makes sense. So for example, there are schools that didn't apply this year that may apply next year that have a greater need than us, that would put them ahead of us in the queue, even though we've applied. And I think MSBA, they try to be as fair and equitable as they can be. For example, I know that they will take into account that this is our 4th submission. I know that they will take into account that there are some changes in the SOI. I know that they'll take into account our NEASC accreditation. But with all of that, we're still competing against other schools that have needs, right? I think, Tony, did I cut you off earlier?
We haven't had these conversations. But the figure that was kicked around about 3 years ago was $124 million. Construction costs go up 4% a year for schools. So right now we're looking at about a $140 million project if we broke ground today, which would add, we did the Galvin, we borrowed about $38 million, which added $220 to the average tax bill. If we funded the Galvin on our own, your average tax bill would go up between $800 and $1,000. I'm not sure the town could commit to that, especially anybody living on a fixed income.
Yeah.
I have a freshman into high school now. I went to that high school X number of years ago. It hasn't changed. It needs to get redone. But I'm not sure I can balance that on the taxpayers of Wakefield. It's not. I would rather ask the taxpayers for $70 million than $140. you're right. You're absolutely right.
'em. Correct. $53. Right.
And I agree to those points as well, but I'm not, you know.
We have a
The other side of it is what do you do if the taxpayers say no? Reality is, I think it's good, but reality is, we are already spending awful lot more per child than we were when we were in school. A lot more. It needs to be spent, I'm not arguing that. But what happens if the taxpayers say no and then say no again? Remember Proposition 2.5? The taxpayers can turn right around and do an underride next year if they want to. So I caution you with your attitude of, if you don't want to pay more, leave. Because they may turn around with the same attitude and say, we don't want to pay for schools that our children aren't in, and cut the budget draconianly. I'm not sure that's a word or not, but
I'm not afraid to ask the question and put it to the taxpayers, because so we may be voted no. I understand that the yes or no, sir.
but they may go no further. They may go further than you want
We
them
can't
to.
continue to let our facilities crumble because we're worried to ask that question to the taxpayers. And if we build up enough momentum in the town, I think we can get enough votes to override any of those votes that come in. Like other towns have successfully done in this Commonwealth.
I think it's fair to that point that we had great deal of citizen energy around this building, but let's also remember, those of us that have been around for a while know how long it took to make any substantial movement on the Galvin. That when the work that this building didn't exist because of one energy that came about that was successful. We had unsuccessful efforts on a number of projects. That now certainly Wakefield had some difficult days back then that we couldn't afford it, and that's what the taxpayers and the citizens decided. One of the things I would caution is putting the cart too much before the horse. If we put out too much raw speculation, that's going to take on a life of its own,
Right.
and it's going to become the story when we know that it isn't the story. One of the things that MSBA is absolutely going to want, which is what they have within the feasibility studies, is certain options. We don't put forward, we don't go to MSBA with one plan and say this is what we want. We go with a couple of options to see what their feedback is. If they're going to truly partner, and that's truly what it is, it's a partnership. It's this municipal, state, town-state partnership on the state's commitment toward education, matching or exceeding, frankly, the local taxpayers' contribution. But I would just be concerned that we put out too much information that is raw speculation that either winds up being wrong, and it's one thing if it's wrong, if it's inaccurate that needs tweaking, it's one thing. But if it's a whole different new storyline, when we do have the information after feasibility studies and
Yeah.
architects and engineers and people that have some energy behind this, then the taxpayers are saying, well, gee, do the school department, does the town council, do they know what they're doing? How many pieces of information are they going to tell us? They're all over the map. They can't get their act together.
Right.
So it's a really fine balancing act between, I want to see some creative and some citizen energy behind exactly beginning to tell the story again about the absolute need and beginning to rally, all the citizens around exactly that. But I would caution that too much information that we pretend is accurate, while we know that it's not, is going to be to our detriment when we actually have information a couple of years. If the stars align and it's really outstanding, which I'm sure it will, but a really outstanding SOI gets submitted in April, and the stars align next December, we're having a different conversation at the superintendent's state of the schools, and the MSBA approved us to enter the next round, blah, blah, blah. If the stars align there, that's the point, a year from now, when we have some real, meat in the game about knowledge about which options the state will support, which options they won't, and how much these things are going to cost in $2020. The other thing that the state said, and I want to be objective because we have to have that as a backdrop, at least fairly, we have to have that as a backdrop in our heads. That in addition to complementing the work that we have put forward, recognizing the need and complementing the feasibility study and the SOIs, they also said, as I mentioned earlier, there are other communities in far worse shape than we are. The other thing that we have to also recognize is a short handful of years ago, they put a lot of money into this town, into this building. So it continues, the Commonwealth, as citizens of the Commonwealth, sometimes it continues to be the other guy's turn. Now I know I'm sounding like the last guy to be parochial, and I'm all Wakefield just as everyone else is. But when we have these sort of strategic conversations, we have to, I think, objectively appreciate that too.
Thanks, Tom. So just one point, one of the things that was shared with me is that Galvin was reimbursed at 53%, right? Yes?
So once you're accepted into the program, how much time do you have to get the town to vote and approve and support the plan?
How long did it take with Galvin, Chris, once we're accepted into the grant program? So about a year? Right. Yeah. Right. So a little over a year. So after the votes and everything, then they take what is just, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you? I don't think I heard all of your questions. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You can reapply, revote. Yes, Michael.
Maybe just one final thought on the MSBA. Minimum wage has gone up twice already, and it's going to go up 3 more times. That's 6% of every dollar that it's gone up. That's going to go back to the state. Maybe we need to lobby our legislators that some of that money needs to go to MSBA for our infrastructure around the state. I think MSBA's funds have been cut or at least level funded for the last few years. And I think that the 53% that we got here at the Galvin, I know of another school district that's doing a project for a high school, and they're not getting over 50%. They're getting under 50%. So I think MSBA is stretching every dollar that they can, and they need more money in their budget. So if, and I know that they're also selling some other new stuff in the state that's generating tax revenue too. Yeah. Maybe that should be going to our schools.
Thanks, Michael. I can tell you, I'm new to this role, but I can tell you in talking with other superintendents, we are going to get the support of MSBA. From my perspective, I think it's a matter of time, and I think it's worth the investment. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a plan B and a plan C. I think those are critical aspects of just being prepared, but I think we're going to get there, and I think we're going to be better for it when we do. Other final comments? Yes, Andy. The deadline on the parent survey probably be the end of next week. Yeah. Currently, I think we have, I think 200 parents have already replied to that. So here we have about 50 people here tonight, 60 people here tonight. And we've already had, 200 people reply on the parent side and another 150 administrators right now, or another, excuse me, not administrators, teachers. And so we're at about 350 or 380 right now. So which is great. And a lot of what we're seeing in regard to the data is consistent with the emerging needs that we shared in our earlier slides. Other questions? So the way that we had planned this evening was to do breakout sessions. I don't know that anyone anticipated that the MSBA conversation and the high school conversation would go on as long as it did. What I would like to do is, for people that need to go, thank you very much for coming. I would like to invite kind of our administrators down front. And if you have any remarks or anything that you think is important for me or any of the administrators to know, you can let them know. And if you can participate in the survey and let your friends know that that's available, it would be greatly appreciated. So I want to thank you very much for coming tonight. Your time is much appreciated. And thank you for your comments. Thank you.